When our HOA president tasered my mom over a navy blue mailbox, little did she know, she had just taken down Cumberland County's top prosecutor, someone who's been putting away crime bosses and murderers for the past 15 years. But what happens when the state's most feared legal mind sets her sights on a corrupt homeowners association? I nearly jumped out of my skin when the doorbell rang at 7 a.m. on a Saturday. Who on earth visits this early? I peeked out the window and saw Amanda Reynolds, our HOA president, tapping her foot impatiently on our welcome mat. Her bright red nails matched her lipstick as she clutched a piece of paper tightly in her hand. Mom was still in her pajamas, sipping her coffee when she opened the door. I stayed back in the hallway, just watching. Without even saying hello, Amanda declared, "Catherine, this is a violation notice," and thrust the paper into Mom's hand. "Your mailbox color is not approved. The fine is $47 due by next Friday," she added, her tone dripping with authority. Mom glanced at the newly painted navy blue mailbox sitting at the curb. "What exactly is wrong with it?" she asked. "It violates HOA Code 39.2b. All external fixtures must be painted in approved colors," Amanda replied, her voice overly sweet, one of those fake, polite tones people use when they're being mean, but trying not to sound like it. "I checked the guidelines before painting it," Mom said calmly. "There's no list of banned colors," she added. Amanda's smile faded. "We know an unapproved color when we see one. Navy isn't on our approved list." "May I see this list?" Mom asked. "It's in our internal documents," Amanda said, her voice tight. "Either pay the fine or repaint it white by Friday," she added, turning and strutting away, her heels clicking on the walkway. Mom shut the door, still staring at the notice. "This is ridiculous," she muttered under her breath. As Cumberland County's top prosecutor for 15 years, she was used to dealing with murderers and gang leaders, not squabbles over mailbox colors. I helped her make pancakes while she told me stories about the courthouse. "In my line of work, Jamie, evidence is everything. Facts matter, not just because someone says so," she said, flipping the pancakes. Just then, I saw cars start pulling up next door. Mrs. Bennett was hosting another one of her loud garden parties, her third this month. Guests parked all over our driveway, and the music was so loud it made our windows rattle. "Should we call someone?" I asked. "They're breaking the noise rules, and those cars are blocking us in," Mom sighed. "Let's document it first." She snapped photos of the cars, then used an app on her phone to measure the noise level, 78 decibels, way over the 65 allowed by HOA rules. Through the kitchen window, I spotted Amanda arriving at the party. She hugged Mrs. Bennett, accepted a drink, and then both of them looked toward our house, laughing. I felt a knot in my stomach. "Mom, look," I whispered. She watched for a moment. "Interesting," she said, her voice thoughtful. "Looks like we might be dealing with some selective enforcement here." Later that afternoon, she wrote a polite email asking for the architectural guidelines that mention mailbox colors. "Always assume it's just a mistake," she told me, "but never assume people are being unfair on purpose." Monday passed without a response. Tuesday came and went. Then on Wednesday, another notice showed up on our door. This time, it was for a $120 fine for not complying with the first violation notice. Mom called the HOA office 4 times. Every time, she was sent straight to voicemail. On her 5th call, someone finally picked up. "HOA office, how can I help you?" a bored voice answered. "This is Catherine Adams at 1872 Pinewood Drive," Mom said. "I'm calling about 2 fines I received regarding my mailbox, and I need a copy of the color guidelines." "That information is only available at board meetings," the voice responded. "When is the next meeting?" Mom asked. "It was yesterday," came the reply. "The next one is in 2 months." Mom's lawyer face appeared, the calm, determined look she always wore when she was getting down to business. "I need to speak with Amanda directly then. She's very busy this week." And just like that, the call dropped. That evening, Mrs. Bennett's teenage son threw a football that knocked over our garden gnome, shattering it. When Mom went to discuss it with Mrs. Bennett, she claimed she hadn't seen anything happen and slammed the door in Mom's face. As Mom swept up the broken pieces, A shiny black SUV pulled up in front of our house. Out stepped Amanda, followed by two men in polo shirts, the HOA board member logos stitched on their chests. "Catherine," Amanda called out, strolling onto our property without so much as a knock. "These fines need immediate attention. We're here to collect payment." "I've been trying to reach you for days," Mom said. "I need to see the section that specifically prohibits navy blue." The taller man stepped forward. "The board has discretion to determine aesthetic violations. Pay now, or we'll place a lien on your property." Mom straightened up, her stance suddenly that of a courtroom pro. "Are you an attorney, sir? Because placing a lien requires specific legal procedures, not just threats on someone's front lawn." The man's face turned red. Amanda cut in, her voice cold. "We know the law, Catherine. You have 3 days to pay both fines, plus a $25 late fee. Otherwise, things are going to get very unpleasant for you." As they walked away, I whispered to Mom, "Don't these people seem like bullies?" She watched them go, her face thoughtful. "Yes," she said quietly, "but bullies usually pick on people they think won't fight back." She pulled out her phone, snapped a few more pictures of our mailbox from different angles, then called her assistant at the prosecutor's office. "Derek, I need a favor," she said. "Can you pull property records for Pinecrest Gardens HOA? Also, any complaints filed against them in the last 5 years? Thanks." Turning to me with a small smile, she said, "Let's see if any of the neighbors have had similar issues." Knowledge is power, Jamie. That night, I overheard Mom on the phone with Judge Wilson, one of her old law school friends. She rarely brought work home, but I could hear something in her voice. It told me this mailbox issue was becoming much more than just a simple fine. I fell asleep wondering what would happen in 3 days when the payment was due. Little did I know, our quiet life in Pinecrest Gardens was about to erupt. What was Amanda hiding that made her so desperate to control every little detail of our neighborhood? Friday morning, I woke up to a strange clicking sound outside my window. Peeking through the blinds, I saw Amanda Hayes walking around our yard, snapping pictures of everything: our flower beds, the porch, even the gap between the garbage cans. When she aimed her camera at my window, my heart skipped a beat and I ducked down. "Mom," I called out, "Amanda is taking pictures of our house." Mom was already dressed in her charcoal gray suit, her sending people to jail outfit, as I like to call it. She marched out the door, and I followed, sticking close behind like she was my shield. "Amanda, what do you think you're doing on my property?" Mom asked, her voice calm, but with an edge that made it almost intimidating. Amanda jumped, nearly dropping her fancy camera she was using to document violations. "Catherine, it's my duty as the HOA president," she said. "What violations are we talking about?" Mom crossed her arms. Amanda glanced at her clipboard. "Your lawn is 0.3 inches too tall. Your trash cans were visible from the street for 15 minutes yesterday. Your garden hose isn't properly stored, and that mailbox of yours is unauthorized." She spoke like she was reciting from a well-practiced list. "How exactly did you measure my grass?" Mom asked. Amanda pulled out a special tool from her purse, a precision lawn height gauge, apparently a standard tool for HOA officers. Mom held out her hand. "Mind if I see the section of the HOA bylaws that covers grass height?" Amanda's smile tightened. "The board has the discretion to interpret aesthetic standards. Pay the fines by 5 p.m. today, or there will be consequences." With that, she spun around and marched off, her clipboard hugged tightly to her chest. At breakfast, Mom's phone kept buzzing with messages from her office. She was supposed to be prepping for a big trial, but instead, she was sorting through the stack of HOA papers we'd gotten when we moved in. "Jamie, look at this," she said, pointing to a page. "The HOA guidelines don't say anything about mailbox colors, only that they must be kept in good condition, which ours is." Mom spent her lunch break at the county records office. When she got home that evening, her eyes had that sparkly look they always got when she'd cracked a tough case. "Something doesn't smell right in Pinecrest Gardens," she told me, spreading papers all over the kitchen table. 3 families on our street left suddenly last year: the Washingtons, the Patels, and the Garcias. All of them sold their homes for way less than they were worth after getting hit with multiple HOA violations. She pointed to some property records. And guess who bought those homes under different company names that all lead back to the same owner? Hayes Property Holdings. That's Amanda Reynolds. That's messed up, I said, suddenly understanding why Mom was so fired up. Instead of paying these bogus fines, Mom said, I'm sending them a formal letter requesting a hearing, which I'm legally entitled to under state law. She spent all evening working on that letter, quoting laws that sounded like some kind of secret code. Civil Code Section 5855 and violations of due process under the Davis-Sterling Act. As she sealed the envelope, she said, Always fight bullies with knowledge, Jamie. They expect you to be scared, but we'll hit them with the facts. After dinner, I was washing dishes when the water suddenly stopped. The faucet sputtered and ran dry. Mom, the water's not working. We went outside with flashlights to check the main valve by the sidewalk. The metal cover was half off, and Mom carefully lifted it. Someone's messed with this, she said, pointing to fresh scratch marks around the valve, which was firmly turned off. She turned it back on, and we heard water rushing through the pipes again. Just as we stood up, headlights swept over us. Mrs. Bennett drove by slowly, phone to her ear, watching us closely. The next morning, Mom found a deep scratch along the side of her car. That afternoon, our trash didn't get picked up, even though everyone else's had been. On Monday, the principal called me to his office to ask about some reports of screaming from our house, something that never happened. Every time something went wrong, Mom made sure to document it. She took pictures, jotted down the dates and times, and saved every piece of mail we got. Then, on Wednesday, we received a certified letter saying we owed $2,300 in fines, penalties, and administrative fees. It also mentioned an emergency HOA board meeting on Friday, where they would vote on placing a lien on our home. Mom called the prosecutor's office and took a rare day off. She spread all her evidence across the dining table, photos, bylaws, property records, and printouts of laws I couldn't even begin to understand. Jamie, she said, highlighting sections of paper, I think they're targeting homes they want to flip for profit. The 3 families that left, they all had minor issues that turned into huge fines, like our mailbox. But this time, they picked the wrong house. Mom grabbed her phone and called her friend Emily, who worked at the local newspaper. Hey, it's Catherine. Remember that story you wanted about community corruption? I think I might have something bigger than what we discussed. That night, someone left a dead bird on our porch. When Mom found it the next morning, she wasn't scared. She was resolute. She called the police non-emergency line to report it as harassment. Later, I overheard her on the phone. Derek, I need every file we have on intimidation tactics used by organized groups. Yes, like gangs, but also in business operations. And I want everything on RICO applications to non-criminal enterprises. At dinner, Mom told me she was going to the emergency HOA meeting tomorrow night. This ends now, she said, her prosecutor face fully on. I want to come too, I insisted. I've seen everything that's happened. After a moment of thought, she nodded. All right, but stay close to me. As we finished eating, 3 more HOA violation notices were shoved under our door. One said our porch light was too bright. Another said our welcome mat wasn't standard. And the third one claimed our garden gnome replacement was unauthorized. Mom just laughed, which wasn't the reaction I expected. They're getting desperate, she said. They know I'm not backing down. That night, I couldn't sleep, wondering what would happen when Mom confronted Amanda with all her evidence. And why was our little navy blue mailbox causing all this trouble? I had no idea that in less than 24 hours, our quiet neighborhood dispute would explode into something big enough to make the evening news across the whole state. Would Mom's years of putting away dangerous criminals prepare her for what Amanda was willing to do to protect her real estate scam? My heart was racing as we walked into the packed community center. Amanda sat at the front table, looking like a queen on her throne, whispering and laughing with Mrs. Bennett while pointing at us. When we walked in, the room fell silent. 50 neighbors suddenly found their shoes very interesting. You shouldn't have come, whispered Mr. Ortiz, our friendly neighbor from across the street. Amanda has been bragging all day about how she's going to make an example of your family. Mom squeezed my hand. That's exactly why we're here. When Mom signed up to speak, Amanda rolled her eyes. And then, like magic, the sign-up sheet vanished right after. 6 people talked about garden gnome rules and pool hours before Amanda tried to shut things down. We still have speakers on the list, called out an old man from the back. Rebecca Adamsh hasn't spoken yet. Mom walked up to the microphone like she owned the place. Tonight, she wasn't just Mom. She was Prosecutor Morgan, the woman who made criminals sweat. My name is Rebecca Morgan, she began, her voice steady. I've lived in Pinecrest Gardens for 8 years, and I'm here to talk about the bogus fines on my property and the constant harassment my family's been put through. Amanda's face flushed red. This isn't on the agenda, she barked. According to HOA Bylaw Section 4.3, residents can address grievances during open comments, Mom said, holding up the rulebook like it was Exhibit A. I've documented 17 cases of selective enforcement, including... Amanda slammed her hand on the table, cutting her off. Your 3 minutes are up. I just started, Mom replied calmly. Actually, she's only spoken for about 20 seconds, the elderly man said, holding up his phone with a timer on it. Amanda stood up, her voice shaking. You're disrupting this meeting with your baseless claims. I'm calling security. 2 large men in black polo shirts with HOA enforcement patches appeared from a side door. One had a flashlight, and the other had a belt full of gear, pepper spray, handcuffs, and something I couldn't make out. Ms. Morgan, it's time for you to leave, the bigger one said, grabbing Mom by the arm. Get your hands off me, Mom said, her voice steady but firm. I have the legal right to speak at this meeting. The room was dead silent. You could hear the air conditioning hum. Phones came out as our neighbors started recording. She's getting hostile, Amanda said loudly. Remove her now. I'm not hostile, Mom replied, her voice cool. I'm exercising my rights as a homeowner. Then it all happened so fast. The second guard pulled something off his belt, a small black device with 2 metal prongs. There was a sharp crack like a bolt of electricity, and Mom's body went rigid. The taser wires hit her square in the chest, and she hit the floor hard, her body convulsing. I screamed and ran to her. MOM. Stop. Stop hurting her. The room filled with gasps. Mrs. Cruz, who lived 2 doors down, shouted, Call 911. 3 neighbors rushed over to help Mom. Amanda stood behind her table, completely unfazed. Our security team is allowed to use reasonable force when homeowners become a threat, she said flatly. She was just talking. I cried, tears streaming down my face as I held Mom's hand. She was struggling to breathe, her eyes wide with pain and shock. The guard, who tasered her, just smirked. Should have paid your fines, lady. Mr. Ortiz pushed his way through the crowd. Are you out of your mind? You can't taser someone just for speaking at a meeting. She was being aggressive, Amanda insisted, as the crowd started shouting in disbelief. I felt threatened. I watched Mom's face change as she caught her breath. Her eyes narrowed, and I knew that look. It was the same one she got when she walked into court to face down Cumberland County's worst criminals. Phone, she whispered to me, her voice shaky but clear. Back pocket. Call Judge Wilson. Then Detective Chavez. Do you even realize who you just assaulted? Mrs. Cruz shouted at Amanda. Just another entitled homeowner who thinks she's above the rules. Amanda waved her hand dismissively. That's Cumberland County Chief Prosecutor Rebecca Morgan, Mr. Ortiz said, loud enough for everyone to hear. The woman who took down the West Side Gang and sent 3 corrupt politicians to prison last year. The 2 security guards exchanged uneasy glances. One leaned in and whispered something to Amanda, and suddenly her smug grin disappeared. Sirens wailed in the distance, and the paramedics rushed in to check on Mom. As they worked on her, she whispered something that sent a chill down my spine. I've been looking for my next big case. Looks like I just found it. Blue and red police lights flickered outside as news vans pulled up. Reporters swarmed me, shoving microphones in my face while I tried to follow Mom to the hospital. Is it true your mom was tasered over a mailbox? One reporter shouted. "Is your mom going to sue the HOA?" another asked. Mom spent the night in the hospital, getting tests to make sure the taser hadn't caused any serious damage to her heart. By the next morning, her office had already sent 2 investigators to our house. They hauled away boxes of evidence we'd collected over the months: photos, emails, the fake violation notices. "You got the whole thing on video?" Detective Chavez asked, watching the clip I'd taken on my phone. "Mom always said to document everything," I replied. The detective's eyes widened as she saw the moment Mom hit the floor, tasered. "This is more than just assault," she muttered. "This is reckless endangerment," I said as I glanced at the search warrants Judge Cooper had personally signed. By noon, 3 police cars had already surrounded the HOA office. Officers started hauling out computers and entire filing cabinets, while the neighbors stood outside on their driveways, watching it all unfold. Later that afternoon, Mom came home, still in her court suit even though the doctor had told her to take it easy. 7 patrol cars escorted her as she arrived, and the neighbors were lining the streets. They clapped as she slowly made her way to our front door. "Are you really going after them?" I asked as I helped her to the couch. She winced a bit as she sat down and said, "They've been hurting people for years. Someone had to put an end to it." The doorbell didn't stop ringing after that. Neighbors were coming by with casseroles, flowers, and stories of their own. Mrs. Flores was in tears as she told us how Amanda had slapped her with a $3,000 fine for planting roses without permission, just days after Mrs. Flores had turned down Amanda's cheap offer to buy her house. Mr. Sharma showed us letters threatening to slap a lien on his property over holiday decorations that couldn't even be seen from the street. A couple of weeks later, he was forced to sell his dream home for 30% under market value to some company called Pinecrest Investments. Mom listened carefully to every word, jotting down notes despite her trembling hands. Then, when Judge Cooper and the district attorney arrived, they laid out a stack of documents on our dining table. "It's bigger than we ever imagined," whispered the DA. "Amanda's brother-in-law works at the bank approving these home loans. And the security company? Not registered anywhere." 3 days later, Mom, still bruised but standing tall, held a press conference in our driveway. Today, the Cumberland County Prosecutor's Office has filed 37 charges against 5 members of the Pinecrest Gardens HOA board, she announced as cameras flashed. The charges included criminal conspiracy, fraud, falsifying records, assault, practicing law without a license, and several civil rights violations. News helicopters buzzed overhead while police cars pulled up in front of Amanda's house. The cameras caught it all: Amanda being dragged out in handcuffs, yelling about her rights as Mom stood calmly across the street, watching. The investigation has uncovered an organized scheme targeting specific homeowners, Mom continued. Board members had been fabricating violations and slapping on ridiculous fines to force residents to sell their homes below value. They then bought up the properties through shell companies, flipping them for huge profits. The financial records were staggering. Amanda and 3 board members had made over $3 million flipping homes right here in our neighborhood. They drove out 14 families with harassment and absurd fines. Mrs. Bennett wasn't just the noisy neighbor we thought she was. She was paid $500 for every homeowner she helped target, throwing loud parties and making a racket near homes they wanted to buy. The most shocking revelation came when the police tracked down the security guard who tasered Mom. Turns out he was Amanda's nephew with a criminal past. He'd just gotten out of prison 6 months prior for aggravated assault. Detective Chavez told us the guy wasn't even licensed to carry a taser, and they'd found evidence he'd used it on at least 4 other homeowners who dared to push back against their authority. A couple of weeks later, a judge froze all the HOA's accounts and suspended the board while the investigation continued. A court-appointed receiver took over to manage neighborhood affairs. Mom still had bandages from the taser when she showed up in court to face Amanda at the preliminary hearing. "You think you've won?" Amanda hissed as officers led her past us. "This isn't over." Mom just smiled and replied, "Actually, it ended the moment you thought the rules only applied to other people." When the judge officially dissolved the HOA and put a new elected board in charge, The neighbors gathered at our house to celebrate. The first decision of the new board? Approving whatever color anyone wanted for their mailbox. 6 months later, I helped Mom hang a plaque in her office. It was a small blue mailbox frame with the taser barbs that the hospital had removed from her chest. "Why keep something so awful?" I asked. Mom gently touched the frame, to remind me that standing up to bullies is always worth it, even when it hurts. Outside, I saw a dozen neighbors painting their mailboxes navy blue, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Thanks for watching. Hit the subscribe.